Well, hope you can hear me. I'll make sure of that. Okay, this program this afternoon offers a great deal of variety of many different sounds. Now you've heard some nice, you call it light music, which is what we've heard so far, T for two. You know, Shostakovich wrote that from the Humans melody. Did you mention that, Robert? On a challenge at a beer drinking session with his fellow composers. He says, I could arrange that for orchestra in 1 hour. And he did. Anyway, but here, what we're going to do next is a very serious side of that culture, and it's kind of an interesting story. How many of you have heard of Boris Lyatoshynsky? Nobody. Okay. He was a Ukrainian composer, and he tried very much to bring the music of Ukraine into the public to be heard. He wrote this third symphony, and he titled the last movement, Peace Will Conquer War. And that is the theme of what you're going to hear. It's a rather serious word. It doesn't really even fit in a pops concert, but it's so timely, so correct, because this is the time when President Trump is going to go and talk to his buddy Putin, and let's see what will come out of that. But the timing is uncanny, because it's exactly about the suffering of the Ukrainian people, and that's the movement you're going to hear. It was premiered in 1951, and it was hated by everybody. Why was it hated? Well, the Soviet government that was in charge of Ukraine at that time just considered it ideologically wrong, and that it should not be performed. And the Union of Composers, that part of the Soviet Union, said it had to have some revisions here and there, and the title has to be removed. What do you mean, peace will conquer war? They took that as a kind of rightist propaganda. It became that. But the composer, Lyatoshynsky, decided that it should be, and it should remain. And what you're going to hear is the last movement of a recording made recently. And it's a serious work. It's on the modern side. It's not exactly T for two, you know. It is very serious, but at the same time it has a great deal of meaning. And it lasts about 10 minutes. And one of our very talented members of our orchestra, Franklin Au, is going to conduct it. And it's been recorded now this way. At the end, you're going to hear the sound of glorious victory, that peace will remain. You hear chimes and everything else. It's a modernistic work, but if you listen to it, I put a sentence together that really talks about how a powerful expression this is of the suffering of a people, and it's expressed to you through music. So here it is. So Franklin, please take over.
All right, thank you very much, David, for going through this. There's a lot of things I was planning to say anyway. I just wanted to say a few personal things about this work and how I came across it. I first came across this symphony pretty much shortly after the war broke out in spring 2022. I happened to stumble across this work online, and when I first heard this work, it just really blew me away. And I was amazed at the power and the intensity of this symphony. I happened to come across Lyatoshynsky through my familiarity with a student of Lyatoshynsky named Lyatoshynsky Symphony So that shows is considered to be the most famous Ukrainian composer today, and later led into Lyatoshynsky. To talk a little more about this fourth movement that we're going to perform today, this symphony had a bit of a very difficult history, and the fact is that in 1951, after the unofficial dress rehearsal premiered, the Soviet authorities banned the work, and so Lyatoshynsky to make revisions throughout the entire symphony, especially the last movement where he made substantial changes to it. And it was finally premiered after a couple of iterations. It was finally officially premiered in Leningrad in 1955 under Ukrainian Zelensky, and was performed in this revised version for many, many years. It was only until after the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991 when Ukrainian conductors decided to try to restore the original version as much as possible. They were able to at least restore this final movement that we're going to perform today. And if you're wondering, since Lyatoshynsky had made changes throughout the whole work, what about the other movements? How did the other movements affect? And so right now, there's been some new musical work that's been taking place recently, and they've watching this in Kiev, I think, rediscovered his manuscripts, and they found that he actually had made corrections to the entire work and wanted to restore it back to the original version. There is a big initiative going on in Kiev and also in Minneapolis. It's called, I want to give a shout out to Project Symphony 25. They're planning to make a new reconstruction of this work, of the original 1951 symphony, based on the original manuscripts. And the premiere was originally slated for this Labor Day weekend, but for various reasons, it's been pushed back to March of next year. And because of this initiative, it motivated me to want to program this fourth movement for you to hear today. So without further ado, the original final movement to Boris Lyatoshynsky Symphony No. 3, Please show the keyboard. Thank you.
Quite an emotional piece. A lot of fun. Okay, you ready for some fun now?